Thank you, Your Honor. The state we will be calling Ginseng Melure.
You solemnly swear that the testimony you're about to give will be the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth.
I do.
Thank you.
You may be seated. Thank you. And you may proceed with your examination of the witness.
Mr. Melure, could you please state your full name?
Ginseng Walker Miller.
And do you reside here in Maui?
I do.
Well, where are you from originally?
Illinois. Murfreesboro, Illinois.
Okay, I'm sorry, I didn't catch the city.
Murfreesboro.
And how long, Mr. Melure, how long have you been here on Maui?
Originally, I lived here between 2008 2009 for about a year and a half. And then since 2012, I've been here. Since about August, I guess. July or August 2012.
Are you here alone or do you have family?
I'm married, my wife lives here, and I have a son also lives here.
Okay. And what does your wife do?
She's a lawyer. She works with Legal Aid Society.
Now, are you employed, Mr. Melure? Are you employed? Sorry.
Yes, yes I am.
Where do you work?
Mana Foods. I'm a baker there.
And how long have you been at, is this the Mana Foods in Paia?
Yes.
And how long have you been at Mana Foods?
Since late in the summer of 2012.
And you have been there ever since then to the present?
Yes.
Do you know a person by the name of Stephen Capobianco?
Yes.
And how is it that you know that person?
We work together in the bakery at Mana Foods.
And how long did you work with that person?
About a year.
He was in the bakery with you as well?
Yes.
If you were to see that person again, would you be able to recognize him?
Yeah.
If he's here in this courtroom, could you please point to him and describe an article of his clothing?
Okay. That's Stephen Capobianco sitting at the defense's table. He's wearing a dark jacket.
Your Honor, this time may the record reflect that Mr. Melure has identified the defendant.
The record will so reflect.
Now, this bakery at Mana Foods, where is it located within the store?
It's behind the store from the perspective of the street, and it's at a lower level than the store, so it's kind of behind and below.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that it's not an open viewed area to the public?
No, it's completely
Or
closed
to the
off
customers?
public. Yeah.
Okay. And right now, is there a supervisor that, I guess, supervises the bakery area?
Yeah, the bakery manager is Dave.
Okay, and what is Dave's last name?
Rasmussen.
Now, was he the supervisor back in February of 2014?
I don't know if he had that title at the time, but effectively, yes.
Effectively meaning?
He was managing it. I don't know when exactly he got the title. It was sometime after I began working there.
Okay. And Mr. Miller, when you began working there, was the defendant already employed there, or did he come after you?
He was already there.
That year that you worked with the defendant, did you get to know him?
Fairly well. Yeah, I didn't know him outside of work at all, really, but we worked together quite a bit.
Okay. When you said you didn't know him outside of work, does that mean you did not hang out with him after work hours or anything like that?
No, I only did anything with him outside of work a couple of times, and it was just move furniture. I had him help me move some furniture that I purchased.
Okay. Now, I want to turn your attention to sometime in, I guess, late March, or it could be early February of 2014, that
So was that late March or early?
Late March or early February 2014. 2014. While you were working at the Mana Food store in Bahia,
Mhm.
did the defendant pose any question, if any, to you that caused you to take notice?
Yeah, it was a fairly unusual question he asked me at work one day.
And what question is that?
He asked me what would be the best way to get away with a murder.
When he asked you what would be the best way to get away with a murder, where did he say this? Where did he ask you this?
In the bakery at Mana Foods.
Was anyone else there at the time?
Dave Rasmussen, the manager, he was there, and I believe Michaela was there as well. I don't know Michaela's last name.
Do you recall where he was physically when he asked you that question?
He was more or less the opposite side of the bakery for me. He had to raise his voice in order for me to hear the question.
Now, do you know if the others that were in the bakery heard it as well?
Yeah, definitely.
And how do you know they heard it?
Because they told me so and we discussed it, and they were between me and him at the time. They would have heard it more clearly than I would have.
Right. And how is it that you know that he was addressing that question to you?
He addressed me first, "Hey Ginseng, how would you do this?"
Now, when you first heard that question, what was your impression?
It struck me as a joke.
Had the defendant ever asked you any question that morbid or violent before?
No, nothing like that at all.
He had asked you questions before those, right?
Sure. Yeah.
But nothing like that.
No.
Did you respond to that question?
Yes.
And do you recall what your response was?
Kind of laughed at it a little bit. Like I said, I thought it was a joke. And then I told him that most murderers are caught because they kill people who they have close connections to.
When you said you got to know the defendant fairly well, was this just through work?
Yes.
And why is it that you think you got to know the defendant fairly well?
We worked directly together several days a week for, like I said, about a year, side by side, working on the same projects all day long. So, as well as you get to know someone under those circumstances, I think I did.
And you said, you testified just a moment ago that after the defendant asked you that question, you know the others heard it because they were between you, but you also talked about it with the others?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Was the defendant present when you talked about it with the others?
I don't believe so, no.
Let me move forward a little bit from after the defendant posed that question about how to get away with murder. Okay. Do you recall coming to work? And I'm going to give you a date, and if you don't remember the date, you can let me know. Tuesday, February 11, 2014.
This would be the first Tuesday after Charlie went missing.
Is that what you found out at some point?
Yeah, that was the day.
Okay. Were you back at work on that Tuesday, February 11th, 2014?
Yes.
Okay. What were your days off back then?
At that time, my schedule was with a Sunday, Monday weekend.
Okay, so your first day back to work would have been that Tuesday, the
Exactly.
11th. Now, at that time, or let me ask you this before I go too far forward. Does that mean you would have worked on Saturday and then had Sunday, Monday off during that weekend?
Yes.
And I'll get back to that in a little bit. But when you went to work on that Tuesday, do you recall if the defendant also was at work?
Yeah, he got there right after I did, a few minutes after I did.
And what time did you normally get to work back then?
Right about 7 o'clock, 7 a.m.
Is this, is this the time you go to work now?
No, these days I get there at 6 a.m., but back then it was normally around 7.
And so you said the defendant was at work on that Tuesday.
Yes.
Now, what, if anything, did you notice about the defendant's hands that Tuesday morning?
He showed me his hands. He had a dark injury across the back of one hand, and then a smaller marks across the back, fingers and knuckles of the other hand.
Okay. And how was it that he showed you those? Did you ask him, or did he just volunteer and show it to you?
Another coworker who had seen John Pollocky, who had seen the injuries previously and discussed them with Steve, asked him about it. And I overheard their conversation, and I went to see what they were talking about. And he was saying that he had lost some sensation in one of the hands because of the injury.
So object this to hearsay?
Hold on.
Move to strike the answer.
Let me clarify that at this point, because it's not hearsay if it's coming from the defendant.
No, I think
I'll sustain the objection, grant the motion to strike, I'll allow to play an appropriate connotation.
Now, when you said you went to, I guess, the area where John Palaki and the defendant was, you said the defendant was discussing the injuries to his hands, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And you just, did the defendant tell you, or John Palaki, how he got those injuries?
He told me.
At that same time?
Mm-hmm.
And what did the defendant say to you as to how he got those injuries?
He said that his hands were injured while he was working on a friend's Honda. He said he was doing some sort of work inside the door. I think they were working on the window, the power window mechanism. And he said that the cable used to lift the window somehow wrapped around his hands and tightly cinched them together. And that's what caused the dark marks across the back of his hands and fingers.
And do you specifically remember him talking about a Honda?
Yeah, he said that specifically on Honda, his story had something to do with the way the mechanism worked in Hondas in particular. I didn't quite catch it, but he did make specific mention of it being a Honda.
Now, did he mention anything about the injury itself as to?
Yeah, he said that he'd
Extent.
lost sensation in part of one of his hands from the injury.
Now, do you know if the defendant knew that your wife is an attorney and works for legal aid?
He did.
How do you know that?
Well, I told him, and he'd done some process serving for her.
Your process serving for her, this is legal papers or legal documents?
Yeah, delivering legal documents.
That morning on Tuesday, February 11th, did any discussion, if any, take place with respect to your wife's position as an attorney between yourself and the defendant?
object as to motion and eliminate. Maybe approach on it?
Yes.
Now, Mr. Miller, did the defendant mention anything that morning regarding a Carly Scott?
Yes.
Okay. Now, without telling us how that first originated, what, if anything, did he say about Carly Scott?
He said that she had gone missing and that the police had been to his house that morning to ask him about what he knew of her disappearance.
Did he mention, if anything, whether or not she was pregnant?
He did.
And how did that come about?
After he told me that his ex-girlfriend had gone missing, he said, well, it's understandable that the police would want to talk to you under those circumstances. And he said that, yeah, especially considering that she was pregnant with his child.
Now, did he, when he first mentioned to you an ex-girlfriend, did you know that he was referring to Carly Scott?
No, not right away.
And who did you believe he was referring to?
The more recent girlfriend,
And do you know who that is? Or who was? Who that was?
her name I cannot recall. Taylor. Taylor.
And did you ask him about Taylor, or did you inquire about Taylor at that point?
I don't remember how it happened exactly, but he seemed to understand that I misunderstood who he was referring to. He clarified.
Now, you said you had come to know the defendant fairly well at work. Had he ever mentioned Carly to you before this, before Tuesday, February 11th, 2014?
It was a name that was only vaguely familiar to me as one that I'd heard in passing a few times, stories he told about other things.
And did you know who she was?
Not really, no, I'd never met her.
Had he ever mentioned that he had gotten her pregnant prior to talking about her being pregnant back in February 11th, 2014?
That was the first I'd ever heard of it.
Did the defendant express, if any, concerns regarding Carly Scott being missing and being pregnant?
He never said anything specifically, as I'm worried about her because she's pregnant. No.
Did he express any concerns whatsoever?
Object as to relevance and 403.
The objection is overruled.
Okay. You can answer the question. Did he express any concerns while he was sharing this information with you?
He never expressed any. The only concern he seemed to express was that he needed to get out of work and get involved in the search. Because
Why did he tell you why he needed to get involved in the search?
yeah, he specifically said that he thought it would look bad. That he was worried. He thought people were watching him, and that he felt, that it looked awful that he was stuck at work while the search was ongoing.
Did he mention that to you specifically, that he thought it might look bad or awful?
I don't remember the specific wording he used, but yeah, he made it clear that he knew he was being watched and that being at work while the search was underway didn't appear good.
Did he express any concerns for himself to you that morning?
Well, he expressed concern at being a suspect in a missing persons case.
That morning, did he ever mention to you that he may have been the last person to have seen Carly Scott?
He did.
And when he mentioned to you that Carly Scott was pregnant and missing, could you describe his demeanor?
He seemed very nervous. Definitely agitated, out of sorts.
Did you take that as concern for Carly Scott, or?
Objection, leading and relevance.
The objection is sustained.
When you said he seemed agitated, could you describe that?
Just visibly nervous, you know, and when he first told me that, you know, what was going on, I was kind of, before it was clear there was a missing persons case he might be involved in, I was kind of chuckling at him, like, oh, what have you done now? You know, he was not having any of it. He said, no, this is serious. And he was just out of sorts all day. He was making weird mistakes in his work that he wouldn't normally.
Okay, when you say he was making weird mistakes in his work, can you explain that, please?
The most specific example I can think of is that he was working on a batch of pies, and I think he got the ratio of one type to another switched around or something. So it was a fairly odd mistake for him to make.
When you say fairly odd mistake, why would you say that?
He was competent in the bakery, and he'd been there a long time. He knew what he was doing.
Had you ever seen him make those mistakes before?
Some small, but it seemed odd at the time. It seemed like the result of being nervous.
Now, you said you had worked that past Saturday and Sunday and Monday were your days off during that weekend we're talking about, right?
Yes.
Was the defendant working that Saturday morning as well?
Yes.
Did you notice injuries on his hands on Saturday morning, the same injuries that you noticed on the following weekend on Tuesday morning?
No.
Did he complain of any injuries to his hands to you on Saturday morning
No.
about losing feeling in his hands or anything like that?
No. Tuesday was the first I learned of that.
Did the defendant express, if any, opinion or commentary how he felt about kids?
He'd made it pretty clear that he thought they were annoying, a nuisance. He didn't want to have any.
He did. I'm sorry, I didn't get that last part.
He said he didn't want to have kids.
Now, are you familiar with how or with what vehicle the defendant drove?
He drove a 4Runner.
And how do you know that?
He talked about it a lot.
When you say he talked about it a lot, this would be at work then?
Yes.
And what would he say about his 4Runner?
Well, at first he was excited about getting it, and then he talked a lot about fixing it, repairing it, breaking it, off-roading a lot. And later on, he talked a lot about getting tires for it. He was very excited about getting a set of tires.
Do you know if he actually got a set of tires?
I don't know if he ever got them or not.
But he talked about it.
Yes.
Now, was it your impression that he was mechanically inclined?
Yeah.
And how did you get, or why did you get that impression?
Because of the sort of work he told me that he did on his vehicles, and he said he'd worked on other friends' vehicles, and he definitely expressed an interest in mechanic work. So.
If I were to show you a picture of this Toyota 4Runner that you're discussing, do you think you'd be able to recognize it?
Yeah.
First of all, I'm going to show you a series of photographs that's been marked for identification. And just for the record, these are exhibits 27, 28, 31, 35, 36, and 38. And I'm showing you counsel these exhibits. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may approach the witness.
Okay, I'm going to show you the first series of photographs first, and these are exhibits 27, 28, and 31. Mark for identification. I'm going to have to take a look at these, and when you're done, just look up and I'll have further questions.
Okay.
Did you have a chance to take a look at this?
I did.
Okay, first, and I'm going to turn your attention to State's Exhibit 27, marked for identification, and ask if you recognize that.
Yeah, those are Stephen's hands.
And do you recognize, you described earlier that he had injuries to the back of his hands. One was, how did you describe the injuries?
Dark marks, like a large one across the back of one hand, and then smaller marks on like the knuckles of the other.
Okay, and are those injuries depicted in State's Exhibit 27?
They appear to be.
And had you seen this photograph before coming to court?
Yes.
And you were able to identify it?
Yes.
As far as State's Exhibit 28, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
Appears to be his right hand with a large dark streak across behind the knuckles.
And that's the one you had just described earlier?
Yes.
And had you seen this photograph prior to coming to court?
Yes.
And does that accurately depict the injury that you saw back in February of 2014?
It does.
And Exhibit 31, do you recognize that?
Yes.
And what is that?
That's his other hand with the marks across. It's like the pinky and maybe the ring finger. Yeah, just the pinky. It looks like the dark marks just below the first knuckle.
And does that accurately depict the injury that you observed back in February of 2014?
It does.
You know, at this time, the state would move into this State's Exhibit 27, 28, and 31.
No objection.
State's Exhibits 27, 28, and 31, marked for identification purposes, are received in evidence.
Your Honor, permission to publish.
Permission granted.
Okay, thank you. At this time, the state will be publishing State's Exhibit 27, which is now in evidence, and that's a photograph depicting the two hands of the defendant. Should I consider this? Here is a pointer. Here, can I have the witness step down and
The
approach
witness
the
may step down.
monitor? Okay. Showing the monitor, you described the injuries that you observed. Could you just point it out to the ladies and gentlemen here in the jury?
This dark mark here that goes across the back of the hand and wraps down the side a little bit. And then this mark here on the pinky finger.
Yeah, I'll have you use this pointer so you don't have to go in front of the
Okay.
monitor.
This dark mark here goes all the way across the hand and wraps down the outside of his hand. And then these dark marks here on the pinky on the opposite hand.
And when you testified earlier that the defendant said that he had lost sensation or feeling in his hands, did he indicate which one?
If he did, I don't recall which it was.
Okay. And let me now publish State's Exhibit 20. Okay. Now you testified that you recognize that as his right hand, is that correct?
Yes.
And is that an accurate depiction of the injury that you saw?
Yes.
Hey, can you point that out for the jury?
It's this dark mark here. Runs across his hand.
And let's go to State's Exhibit 31. Okay. Well, it's just showing a closer view. State's Exhibit 31, which is in evidence. You recognize the injury that you described earlier?
I do.
Hey, can you please point that out?
It's these marks here on the pinky.
Now it's been enlarged. Does that accurately depict that injury?
Yeah.
Okay, you can have a seat. Now I'm going to show you 3 more exhibits that are marked exhibits 35, 36, and 38. John, you saw this already. Your Honor, may I approach?
You may approach
Thank
the
you.
witness.
And they've been marked for identification. Can you take a look at it, please? Now, you just said earlier that you had seen the defendant's forerunners, is that correct?
Yes.
And then you recognize that you're shown a photograph of it. Do these photographs accurately depict the forerunner? Well, first off, how do you know the defendant drove a forerunner?
Because he told me on many occasions.
Okay, and when have you seen it?
Almost every day at work, I saw it parked near my own car.
Okay, and the forerunner that's depicted in case exhibits 35, 36, and 38 marked for identification, is that an accurate depiction of that forerunner?
Yes.
Your Honor, this time the state will move into evidence states exhibits 35, 36, and 38 marked for identification.
Mr. Alcoa.
No objection from defense, thank you.
State's exhibits 35, 36, and 38 marked for identification purposes are received in evidence.
In your permission to publish.
Permission granted.
I'm going to publish first Mr. Jensen what is marked as, or what's in the identification of states exhibit 35. Could you let us know what we're looking at there?
You're looking at the front of Steve's forerunner.
And to your knowledge, has it all been lifted like that?
As far as I know, yes.
And exhibit 36. States exhibit 36, it doesn't have that.
Yeah, it's the driver's side, same vehicle.
It's states exhibit 38.
Yeah, passenger side, same vehicle.
Mr. Rivera, if you concluded a particular topic, this might be a good time for a lunch
That's
recess.
fine.
On the other hand, if you're still on that topic, you can.
No, I'm going to move on to another topic.
All right, then, ladies and gentlemen, we will take our lunch recess at this time. Please keep in mind all of my cautionary instructions. We will see you after 1:30. Thank you.
Is in recess.
Better than that day. I just go back and charge it.
Yeah, but we also maybe. Yeah, we'll bring them both back.
Yeah, I'll charge it.
Okay. Mine is upstairs. Reviews or keep tapes?
Wait, we need it? Show them? Maybe the window?
This is coming to you, I'm gonna ask them about the lens. I'm gonna ask first. This is a stuff for